All right. Welcome to Burn the Ship, my friend. We're officially recording. Thank you for being here virtually. This is the podcast where we connect entrepreneurs with professionals that can help you go all in on your business. You know, the people that have experienced those tribulations of being an entrepreneur and have already been through some of those things. And we want to kind of bottle up some of those skills that you have that helped you persist through and kind of become successful. Hopefully, we can bottle some of those things up and teach it to the people that are watching behind the camera. So, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your business, my friend?
Great. So I'm Juan. I run a product design agency called Juan JU Studios here in the Atlanta area. And I help entrepreneurs, particularly tech entrepreneurs who have startup ideas, take their concepts from zero to one.
Sure. And so is that in the software space? Is that in the like consumer product space? Kind of what are some of your clients that you work with?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients are ones that have some sort of software product, whether it's like a website, an app, something along those lines, and they're looking for product design expertise. So, for example, a tech entrepreneur who may be wanting to run some sort of SaaS product, a service with software, for example, photo backup or something along those lines, and I'll help with the design of their website or the way the app actually works. In many cases, it might be an early stage startup, so a concept is maybe the only thing they have, maybe something as like simple as like a concept on the back of a napkin type of thing, and then I help them sort of maturate that idea into a real fully fledged idea that's built and can be actually released into the world.
Sure. Do you guys actually do the development?
No, we specialize in the design,
Yeah,
but we
sure.
have partners that do the development. But in many cases, the companies have their own in-house engineering teams.
Sure, absolutely. And they're just kind of trying to make that idea a more full picture.
Right.
Yeah, sure. And I guess that's you're probably running into a lot of these companies pre-funding, huh?
No. So even though I help startups that are early stage, they'll typically have at least some amount of funding. Otherwise, it wouldn't be profitable for my business
Sure.
to to engage.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I just don't know really. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs in the startup space as well, in the technology space as well. But we find that it's a very mixed bag. You know, some people are still bootstrapping their companies, things like that. And then I guess the access to capital really has kind of renegotiated itself over the last decade because you kind of can secure some funding now with a good enough idea on the back of a napkin. You know, you need a little bit more than that, but if you have a
Yeah.
solid design phase and you have a solid go to market strategy even before your technology is built, it's kind of crazy how you can find funding these days. So no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so where do you find most of the people that you work with?
So, like with most small businesses, they come through word of mouth or through networks or affiliates, but usually it's referrals.
Sure. Are you guys very present in some of those technology communities in Atlanta?
Yeah, so we're located in the Atlanta Tech Village, as well as connecting with various meetups and organizations around the city.
Yeah, sure. We're
But I'm
members
also
of.
based, but I'm also originally based from Chicago, and I've also lived in New York and LA, so I have pretty much connections across the US.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We are members at Atlanta Tech Village as well. So we
Yeah.
spend quite a bit of time there. If anybody on the podcast has watched the Num Num Sauce episode or My Panda episode or Shopmakers League or anything like that, all of those are shot in the podcast studio in Atlanta Tech Village. So we have a
Oh,
lot
okay,
of
great.
experience there. Yeah, we've done some burn the ships there. It's been pretty cool.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So tell me a little kind of the story. You know, tell me kind of how your business transpired. Tell me how you kind of got into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I've been doing design for over 20 years, and I'm I like to joke that I'm pretty old school and that I got started in the sort of nascency of the web. So before it blew up, so kind of like right around that pre-original .com era, and then I've been sort of doing web design, interaction design ever since. But the focus of my work over the last 12 plus years have been more in product design, whereas before it was maybe more focused on marketing. And one of the things that really excited me was helping businesses be able to take their ideas into something that's actually, rather than just kind of like a brochure, be functional, add value, help users be able to find what they need or be entertained. And in that journey, what I discovered is that it's very hard to take an idea that's maybe in the, head of an executive or some other stakeholder and actually make it real, right? In a tangible way where you're thinking about all the considerations from user onboarding to getting them to engage and be really immersed in the platform. And some of the tools that I learned, one of which is doing like things like a facilitated design sprint, were very helpful in terms of expediting that process because it takes a long time to sort of find product market fit, but you can accelerate that if you find a way of getting user input sooner and also not waiting until everything is like fully coded before you get some early feedback, specifically using things like prototypes, whether that's more of a facsimile and it's just kind of like smoke and mirror,
Hmm.
or something that's a little bit more functional, but it's not fully built out where there's like a back end or anything like that. But that is just enough for you to be able to convey the idea and the experience to the end, at least to the prospective end customer, and then see how they react, and then use that as a way to iterate and improve the product sooner. Because too often, a lot of companies had spent time in the past sort of doing more of a waterfall model where they're spending months and months and months, maybe over a year, designing, iterating, building, all in sort of like a vacuum. And when they released that product, it had no real sort of stress testing, right? And so it's kind of like a make or break. And they never learned along the way what customers would think about it, where they would get tripped up, and whether or not they're seeing the sort of value prop where they are going to be really engaged customers or users. And so doing design sprints was one of the things that sort of made me go, you know what, I think this is something that can be used for other companies as well. And I'd love to sort of provide that tool set to other business owners, particularly ones who are sort of earlier in their product journey, because then you can really help influence what they're making and make sure that it's on the right path sooner.
Sure, absolutely. How far down the process do you kind of walk with your clients? You know, because I know the deliverability of the product that you're talking about right now, of making sure that the design is in line with your potential product market fit. How far down that process do you go? Do you ever see your service kind of converting back into that marketing side of things once you've kind of got a pin in the actual product and you've kind of been down that road and you're developing a little bit more than an MVP? Do you still work with those clients and help them kind of market that product?
Well, so the beautiful thing about products is that it's never really done, right?
Hmm.
Like, so even when you have an exceptional product, let's just use Spotify as an example, it's still iterating and evolving, right? And there's sort of other areas that you can focus on in terms of improvements. And so that first one is the most critical, of course, but then we offer our continuing services in terms of past that early stage product launch to make sure that the product is continually improving and finding optimization where it can, whether that's in KPIs like monthly active users or some other metric. We can work with the clients in terms of helping that also get shored up.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And so, as you started your business and you kind of got into this space, it seems like you already kind of knew a lot about that space from being in those different market and interacting with those different customers. What would you say is the skill that you have that helped you, with some success in the short term? What would you kind of link that early success to as far as skills go?
Yeah, so I think, I'm a big believer in prototyping. So it's meaning like having a bias for action. It's building off of this framework called design thinking,
Hmm.
where rather than trying to sort of conceptualize and intellectualize everything, really I almost always think that the name design thinking is a misnomer because really it's about prototyping and testing. And so it's about being willing to put something together, no matter how streamlined it is, to be able to get feedback. So the skill set there, I think it's really being motivated not to have something be perfect, but have something that's just good enough to be able to get what you need, which at least in the beginning is an opportunity to learn and hear from potential users what it is that they like, what they don't like, where they were confused, where they were tripped up, where things could be improved, and then use that as input to be able to sort of do more and more cycles. And so it's having that attitude of being willing to try it before you go too deep
Hmm.
and being able to test ideas quickly and often. And frankly, also having, I think, sort of nestled in there, it's almost implied is this willingness to fail, right? Like I think people kind of are very precious about their ideas. This is one of the challenges that I have working with a lot of like maybe first time entrepreneurs is that they're so close to their idea they take it personal when you
Yeah.
say like some aspect of their product needs to be improved, and so they kind of want to be very argumentative, and so it's very hard to talk to them about how to make a product better when they don't agree with you. So one of the things that's really important is actually saying, okay, well, we don't need to argue amongst ourselves. Rather than debate, we can test it.
Yeah,
So why
absolutely.
don't we put a prototype together? It doesn't have to be fully functional, and let's just see what people say. Let's see what potential users think of it. Even if it's like a sample set of five, you're going to get pretty good attitudinal and directional feedback from that, where you can say like, okay, three or four out of those five people thought it was really, really confusing, or they wouldn't use the product. And so, yeah, I guess you were right, or you were wrong, or whatever it is. There's always some learning that you could get from it. And so, I think it helps that person be able to detach themselves from the idea being almost like synonymous with their own identity, where it's sort of like it's my baby, it's who I am. Like I am nothing with my product. Well, the thing is, I've worked on enough products where we've had to pivot more than once, and so a lot of the great products in the market, for example, Twitter being among them, didn't start out as Twitter, and started out as a different product. Same thing with Instagram, and so they had to be willing to pivot when their original idea wasn't working and actually glom on the thing that actually had good traction and adoption. And so I think that open-mindedness and willingness to just hear that feedback, be willing to test your ideas and be willing to change is so critical to being successful.
Yeah, I think so too. I think feedback is always positive. You might not you might not always get positive feedback, but the feedback
Right.
loop is so necessary to the progression of your product and to understanding your customer, because I think that probably, out of a consensus, product market fit is a phrase that you'll hear a lot in the startup community, and it's definitely the most difficult thing to achieve. It means you've identified your market and you've built a product that specifically solves a problem for the demographic that that you've pinpointed is experiencing that pain, right? And it's very, very difficult for those two things to work together. And more often than not, I would say, by and large, more often than not, your original product or the problem that you think you're solving is, your product doesn't always solve that problem, or that's not actually the problem that the people that you're trying to sell to are experiencing. So no, the feedback is super, super important.
Also, I think, just to add or build on that, there's also the case where, sometimes you come up with a product where people are like, oh, that's a good product, or I like that idea, I would definitely use it. And then your pricing is wrong.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, that's either too expensive or it's not something that I would be willing to pay. And so you realize your market is wrong, right? Like the people who you think you're building this thing or service for are actually not like it's not within their budget, right? And so then you have to actually refocus your attention on who is the real customer here for the price point that we're trying to sell. Do we need to sell to a more premium or smaller market? And so there's a lot of different aspects that needs to be tested. And I think that's what makes, as you said, product market fit so hard, and it's applicable outside of the startup space, even though that's where it's kind of like you'll hear that phrase the most, but
Yeah.
it's true of all forms of business. It's just that I think with software, you have, I think, more bites at the apple,
Yeah.
because if you have like a restaurant concept, you have to invest in a lease. Maybe you can prototype that by doing like a food truck or a pop up. But if you were to sort of like invest in actually taking over a space, doing the decor, hiring the staff, doing the inventory, and then you realize that there's no product market fit. That is
Yeah,
very hard to pivot at that
very
point.
detrimental. Yeah.
Yeah, but with software, fortunately, you can change the software. You
Yeah.
can make it work differently. You can keep things that worked and change the things that didn't. And so I think that's where there's that advantage to really be able to pivot or iterate or scrap what doesn't work and keep the things that did. And so it allows for a lot more opportunity for evolution in that short time space.
Absolutely, and I think that another value, just to add a little bit more on top of that, even the value of the type of thinking that you bring as consulting with someone on this front as well is that the startup space can have a huge barrier to entry as well. You know what I mean? But often what I see that stands in the way of real growth for some software companies is the desire to add features and benefits that are not product market fit tested, right? So like you have people that build this, first or second iteration of their software, and then they spend tons of development time and money by adding features and benefits for what they think their customers are experiencing without any real feedback. And I've
Mhm.
seen people spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars adding things to a piece of software that didn't add any real value to the tool that they're implementing to try and solve a problem because they didn't understand the exact problem that their customers were experiencing. So, the barrier to entry may not be as high as a physical location. You may be able to undertake that much smaller. You may have a couple of more whacks at it and a better relationship with the person that's actually helping you create, bring your product to life. But without that feedback loop that you're talking about, you can still, burn money. You can burn money straight out
Yeah.
of your pocket, and it's an important thing to think about before you go through that process. So, no, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I think in terms of startups, you have runway, right? And
Hmm.
so, and usually it's maybe anywhere in the very, very early stages, maybe like 12 to 15 months. That's how
Hmm.
much money you have. But making changes to software can be very, very expensive. So it's always easier to make changes while it's sort of in the design phase. The cost will be a lot lower. So rather than waiting to put it like until it's fully built, QA'd, and deployed to actually get customer feedback, obviously, it's more expensive. You don't get any feedback or
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
listen to
that's
feedback.
maximum
Uh,
expensive.
that's yeah, exactly. That's the most painful cost you can pay. But also just waiting that long to get any feedback,
Hmm.
and like you said, not being very strategic, not having the customer voice be part of your product roadmap is absolutely a mistake. I've had work experiences consulting for a variety of different companies, very large companies where they will make choices without talking to anybody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No.
And these are months long like roadmaps. And so those, and if you do the math, like just having all the engineerings and all the people in each of those meetings, like for an hour long Zoom meeting, that's like a $5,000 meeting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they're
No, I
just
agree.
burning cash and they don't even know if this is going to move the needle because they didn't actually talk to their end user in terms of whether or not this is the thing that they want. And so 100% you have to listen to your customer and you have to find ways of getting them in that feedback loop sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say, kind of at the beginning of your business and being an entrepreneur, you found difficult, or skills that you didn't exactly possess because you had never learned those things that you quickly found out that you needed to kind of have in your tool bag?
Yeah, so I think, this is sort of like I would say like the second time that I'm trying to or second time running a studio. So I had my first design agency back in 2008 and I specialized in doing sort of interaction design and microsites for ad agencies, other design studios. And one of the things that I think was a distraction is that I was thinking of it more as an art rather than as a business. And that
Hmm.
was a big, big mistake because The difference is I was investing a lot of my time in terms of finding cool projects to work on or building things or spending a lot of time on things that I thought were like really nice, but weren't actually part of the business requirements. But I thought it was sort of like me over delivering. And it didn't ultimately add value, I think, to the customer or to the client rather. And it actually ate into my costs.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking of it as a businessman. I was thinking of it more as like, oh, this is fun and I want to make the coolest thing I can, and at the cost of making money. And so since then, I've learned that I need to be a lot more disciplined in terms of where I invest my time, how we make a repeatable process in terms of a business, making sure that we deliver on the scope and not worry about over delivering
Yeah.
and taking some of the more boring clients, especially if it helps pay the bills. So I think part of it is like just maturing and learning to sort of move beyond kind of like um, the creative professional who wants to just do things that are fun and trying to focus on doing things in a way that's much more viable as a business.
Well, I think it makes it. I think that's your customer feedback. You know what I mean? I think that is a little bit of feedback from yourself and a little bit of feedback from your customers. But I think that you probably deliver your best work in that most consistent manner. You know what I mean? When you're thinking about things on a very level head, you probably improve the quality of the interaction that you have with your existing clients. So that's good as well. It kind of goes both ways that even though those things are difficult to, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, where you see that in early stage or first time entrepreneurs that, you're kind of attached to your baby and you want it to look and feel and sound a certain way. And,
Yeah.
eventually you kind of get to the point where your goal becomes for your baby to be able to sustain itself. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where you get with your business. You get with your business where you're like, okay, I want to do things more predictably. I want to, quit worrying about the excitement 24/7, and I want to really kind of build things the way that I want to build things. And so I commend you for that because it's a difficult conversation to have with yourself. I've seen that before, and no, kudos to you. That's really, really cool, man. So it looks like your business is in a good place. So how can we help you? How can we connect you to people? Who are you looking to be connected with?
Well, I love to consult and be an advisor to startups, to people who have ideas that have a tech component to it. So, if, for example, if they want to launch a ghost kitchen service or something like that, and they need a website, or they want to test certain ideas that they have that they think would be a great business idea, but don't know really where to start, certainly I'm more than happy to help them. And uh, entrepreneurs in general, I think, are ones that I'm most excited to work with. I think being an entrepreneur is such a lonely and difficult road, and being able to connect with others who are like-minded, who are risk takers, who are ambitious, who have big ideas, they're the ones that are the most exciting to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to buy something from you or contact from you or bend your ear? How do they find you?
Yeah, so they can visit my website. It's spelled wjystudios.com, and they can find my contact information there.
Cool. And so the way that we always like to end the podcast here is kind of that allusion to that the title "Burn the Ship," right? And you called entrepreneurship a lonely road and a difficult road. I think if I remember how you quoted it correctly, but and it is all of those things. But tell me what it feels like to go all in on your business. Tell me why people are going through all those challenges that you see every day from working with startups and entrepreneurs. Tell me kind of what fulfillment people are getting out of that that makes people keep on progressing through those challenges.
Yeah, so I think for me, there was a moment a few years ago where I stepped back and thought about what is the thing that I actually want out of life, and if I wanted to work at a company, what are the things that I would look for? And some of those things were like autonomy, agency, freedom, and as I wrote all of these things down, and there were more, I realized there is no company out there that's going to give me all these things.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And if they exist, maybe there's like a handful and it would be
Yeah.
very competitive and hard to find. And so I was like, why am I spending all my time trying to find that elsewhere when I can build that company, build that life for myself? And I think that's the thing that makes entrepreneurship so much more empowering is that you can create whatever it is that you want. You want a 4-day work week? You can figure out how to create a business that will support that. You want to be able to make certain decisions and not have to do kind of like decision making by committee. Great. You can set up that culture for your own business. You want to work with the best? Fine. Hire people, pay them well, and you can surround yourself with the best. You do not need to just work with an underperforming coworker just because they happen to be there, right? Like you have no freedom to choose who you work with when you're part of a big corporation or company. And so all of those things are kind of like demotivating when you're sort of part of that hamster wheel working for
Yeah.
someone else. But when you have that choice where you're like, you know what, that person is not doing what they need to, I can either motivate them and see if they improve. And if they don't, you can just let them go and find a different person.
Yeah.
Like that kind of freedom is, yes, it can be stressful because you do have to find that replacement, but it lifts a lot of that burden off of your shoulders where you don't feel like you're stuck. Like you feel like anything you want, you can pursue. And there's no ceiling to how successful you can be. Obviously, there's no floor. So
Hmm.
you're not going to get the predictable salary, and potentially you can go in the red, but there's literally no ceiling. You can make over $1 million a month. There's like the reward is as high as you can imagine if you're successful. And that is, I think, the dream, right?
Yeah.
That's the everyone is looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because not even, not only do you get to control what the trophy looks like at the end of the race, but you kind of
Yep,
control how you get there, and you're only
yep,
racing against yourself. So, no,
exactly.
entrepreneurship is a beautiful thing. It's empowered myself and my company and the people around me to do some really, really cool stuff. And this podcast is really just our shot at giving back to that same community. So, I appreciate you being part of that journey. I appreciate you bringing some value to the people that are watching this podcast right now in the future. So, thank you. It really does mean a lot, my friend. I appreciate your commitment of time and your energy to speak a little bit.
Well, thank you for having me, Bailey.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope to do this again. I hope to see in the future, a year or so from now, maybe we'll come back and do this again and look back at this as a screenshot and see how both of our businesses have progressed and use this as feedback for one another. So
Yeah, love it. Yeah,
cool,
look forward to it.
cool. Well, thank you, my friend. I'm going to shut this thing down.